You never think your own child will be the one to break your heart. You tell yourself that love runs too deep for that. That all the sacrifices, sleepless nights, and whispered prayers will somehow protect you from that kind of pain. But I learned that even a mother's heart can bleed in silence. My name is Clara Williams, and for 70 years I've lived a simple, steady life. My late husband James used to say, "A home isn't made of wood, Clara. It's made of moments." He was right. Every wall of our little house carried laughter, arguments, and forgiveness. It was our world, the place where we built everything together. After he passed, that home became my comfort. The chair he loved to read in still stood by the window. His favorite coffee mug still sat on the counter. Sometimes I'd sit there in the quiet and whisper to him like he could still hear me. It was lonely, but it was mine. My safe place, my story. My daughter Denise visited less often after he died. She said life was busy. Work, kids, bills. I understood. I didn't want to be a burden. I'd smile through every short visit, pretending I was fine, even when I could barely lift the grocery bags. Until the day everything changed. It was a Wednesday morning, quiet and ordinary. I was watering my plants when a young man in a suit walked up my path. He had a clipboard and a polite smile, the kind that hides bad news. "Good morning, ma'am," he said. "I'm here about the final property inspection before the handover." I frowned. "I think you're at the wrong address." "I didn't sell anything." He looked at his papers, then at me. "No, ma'am. The documents say this property was sold 2 weeks ago by your daughter, Denise Harris. The buyers are moving in next week." For a moment, everything stopped. The water from the can kept falling, dripping onto my shoes. But I didn't move. His words didn't make sense. My daughter sold my home? When he left, I just stood there for a long time. Then I went inside, my legs trembling. I looked around the living room. My husband's chair, the family photos, the memories lining the shelves. And I whispered, "She couldn't have done this. Not Denise." I called her right away. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice cheerful. "Hey, Mom. How are you?" I didn't bother with greetings. "Denise, someone came by. He said the house has been sold. Please tell me this is some mistake." There was a pause. I could hear the sound of traffic behind her. Then a sigh. "Oh, Mom, I was going to tell you this weekend. Yes, I sold it." "You what?" "Mom, listen," she said quickly. "You're getting old, and that house is too much for you to handle. I found a small apartment closer to me. It's safer and easier to maintain. You'll love it." I felt my throat tighten. "You sold your father's house?" "Without asking me?" She sighed again, impatient now. "Mom, you don't understand. This was for the best. You can't live alone forever. And besides, the money really helped us with some things." For a second, I couldn't breathe. My daughter, my only child, had traded our family home for her own comfort. I said quietly, "Denise, this house isn't just wood and paint. It's all I have left of your father." Her voice softened, but only a little. "Mom, please don't be dramatic. You'll adjust. Trust me." And then she hung up. I sat there in silence. My hands trembled as I looked around the room. The clock ticked softly. The same one James bought on our 10th anniversary. The sound used to comfort me. But now it just echoed through an empty house. I could almost hear his voice saying, "Don't let them take what we built, Clara." That night, I barely slept. I sat by the window staring at the garden James planted years ago. The roses were blooming, red, proud, beautiful. I thought of Denise as a child, running through those flowers, her laughter filling the air. How could the same little girl grow into someone who would betray me like this? By morning, my tears had dried. I made myself a cup of coffee, sat in James's chair, and made a quiet promise. I may be old, but I am not helpless. I called an old friend, Mr. Carter. He used to handle James's paperwork when he was alive. My voice shook as I told him everything. He was silent for a moment, then said, "Clara, if James never transferred the deed to Denise, that house might still be in your name. Bring me the documents if you still have them." Hope flickered, small but real. I went to the bedroom and opened the old wooden box where James kept everything important. Inside was the deed, yellowed with time, and there it was. My name, not Denise's. For the first time in days, I smiled. The house wasn't gone yet. I folded the papers carefully and held them close to my chest. "She doesn't know who she's dealing with?" I whispered, almost laughing through the tears. I may walk slow, but I still know how to stand tall. The next few days I started planning, quietly, patiently. I didn't yell or confront her, not yet. I wanted her to believe I had accepted it, that I was weak, broken, defeated. Because sometimes silence is the loudest answer. And deep inside, I knew this wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about reminding my daughter, and maybe even myself, that love isn't blind obedience. It's respect. And she was about to learn what happens when you forget that. When people talk about betrayal, they always imagine shouting, slammed doors, broken dishes, loud words echoing through the walls. But the truth, real betrayal is quiet. It seeps in like cold air under a locked door. You don't notice it until it chills you to the bone. After Denise sold my house, I didn't scream. I didn't call her again. I just moved through each day like a shadow. She thought I was sitting here waiting to move out, but I was waiting for something else. The right moment. Mr. Carter helped me understand the papers. "Clara," he said, tapping the old deed, "this house is legally yours. Your daughter forged your consent when she signed those sale documents. That's fraud. That word, fraud, sat heavy on my tongue. I didn't want to think of my own child that way. But facts don't change because we wish them to." He looked at me with soft eyes. "We can take legal action. You have every right to stay here." I nodded slowly. "I don't want revenge, Mr. Carter. I just want what's mine, and for her to understand what she's done." He smiled sadly. "Then we'll do this your way, Clara. Quiet but firm." The days passed, heavy with silence. I didn't tell Denise that I knew the truth. She called once, checking if I'd started packing. "Mom, do you need help with the boxes?" she asked, her voice polite, distant. I smiled even though she couldn't see it. "No, baby. I'm managing just fine." "Good," she said. "The movers will come next Friday. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be." "Oh, don't worry," I whispered. "I won't." When the call ended, I sat in the same chair James used to sit in, and I felt him there beside me. Calm, patient. He always believed that truth had its own timing. That week I cleaned the house, not to pack, but to remember. Every picture frame, every creaky step, every smell of old books and lavender polish. This house held my whole life, and I wasn't about to let someone erase it with a single signature. At night, I'd write in my journal, the one Denise gave me on my 65th birthday. On one page, I wrote, "A mother's love is deep, but even deep waters have a bottom." Friday came. A white moving van pulled into my driveway right on schedule. 2 young men stepped out, one holding a clipboard. "Mrs. Harris?" he asked. I smiled. "No, son. My name's Williams, and I'm not moving anywhere today." He looked confused. "Ma'am, we were told—" "I know what you were told. But that sale? It's invalid. You might want to call the person who sent you here." They exchanged glances, awkward and unsure. Okay, ma'am." While they made their calls outside, I walked into the kitchen and brewed coffee. Slow, steady, peaceful. It was funny, really. My daughter thought I'd go quietly. She never realized that silence can be a kind of power. An hour later, Denise's car screeched into the driveway. She rushed inside, face flushed with anger. "Mom, what is going on? Why are the movers calling me saying you refuse to leave?" I turned, calm as ever, and handed her a cup of coffee. "Because this is my home, Denise. And I'm not leaving." She blinked, caught off guard. "What are you talking about?" "The papers were forged," I said softly, cutting her off. "You signed my name without asking." "That's a crime, baby. You took something that wasn't yours." Her mouth opened, but no words came. The color drained from her face. "Mom, I didn't mean to hurt you. We needed the money. I thought you'd understand once I explained." I shook my head. "No explanation can fix this, Denise. You didn't just sell wood and bricks. You sold the place where your father's laughter still echoes." Her eyes filled with tears. I was scared. "You live alone." I raised my hand gently. "If you were scared, you should have talked to me. Love doesn't hide behind lies." We stood there in silence for a long time. She looked small. Not the confident woman she always tried to be. But my little girl again, lost and guilty. Then she whispered, "Are you going to press charges?" I sighed. "No, I don't need a courtroom to teach you what you already know." I set the deed on the table between us. "I just need you to understand that trust, once broken, doesn't grow back the same." She reached for the papers, her hand trembling. "I'm sorry, Mom." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the girl I once rocked to sleep. My heart hurt, but it was steady. "I know, baby, but sorry doesn't buy back a home." In the weeks that followed, things changed quietly. Denise called more often. Sometimes she'd stop by, not to take, but to help. Fixing the porch light, bringing groceries. She didn't say much, but her actions spoke softly. I didn't move to the apartment she found. I stayed right here, tending to my garden, baking on Sundays, watching the sun dip behind the oak tree James planted. One evening as I sat on the porch, Denise came by with her children. She watched them run around the yard and said, "You were right, Mom. This house, it feels like him, like Dad." I smiled. "It always will." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "I don't deserve your forgiveness." I looked at her, my voice calm and warm. "Maybe not, but forgiveness isn't about deserving, Denise. It's about freeing your own heart from bitterness." She sat beside me quietly. For the first time in years, we didn't need words. Just the soft hum of cicadas and the laughter of children playing on the grass. Sometimes, when the sun sets just right, I still feel James there. A whisper in the breeze. A reminder that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's a quiet woman sitting on her porch, holding her home together with nothing but faith and dignity. I don't know what tomorrow will bring, but I do know this. They can take your money, your comfort, even your peace for a while. But as long as you hold on to your truth, they can't take you. And that, my dear, is what I call real independence. There's a moment in every mother's life when she realizes her child has stopped listening. Not out of rebellion, but because they've grown too used to her silence. For me, that moment had come long ago. But this time, my silence wasn't weakness. It was power. After the confrontation that day, Denise stopped calling for almost 2 weeks. I suppose she thought time would dull the edge of what she'd done. But time doesn't heal what pride breaks. It only teaches you how to live with the cracks. I spent those 2 weeks in reflection. My days started early, before the world woke up. I'd brew coffee, sit on the porch, and watch the light crawl over the fence. A quiet reminder that life moves forward, even when hearts don't. The neighborhood kids would wave on their way to school. "Morning, Miss Williams." They'd shout, "Morning, babies." I'd reply, with a smile that hid more than it showed. People think old age makes you soft. They forget that it also gives you clarity, the kind that burns sharper than youth ever could. One afternoon, a knock echoed on my door. I opened it to find Denise standing there, holding a folder close to her chest. "Mom," she said softly, "can I come in?" I nodded and stepped aside. She looked different. Her makeup was gone, her eyes tired, her posture smaller. She sat down at the kitchen table like a child sent to explain a broken vase. "I've been thinking a lot," she began, her voice shaking, "about what I did, about why. I didn't speak. I just waited. Sometimes silence draws truth out better than questions ever can." She opened the folder and slid a few papers toward me. "These are the closing documents for the sale. I went to Mr. Carter myself. He explained everything. I've already started the process to reverse it." I looked at the papers, then at her. "You didn't need to do that, Denise." "I already fixed it." She frowned. "You what?" "I called Mr. Carter the morning after you left. The sale was frozen before any transfer happened. The house never left my name." Her shoulders slumped. "So you knew the whole time?" "Yes." She looked down, ashamed. "Then why didn't you tell me?" I took a deep breath. "Because you needed to feel the weight of what you'd done. Sometimes lessons stick better when silence teaches them." Denise's lips trembled. "I was desperate, Mom. The bills, the debt. I didn't want you to worry." "I would have helped," I said gently. "That's what family does. We face storms together, not behind each other's backs." She pressed her palms together, whispering, "I know. I just didn't want to be a disappointment." That hit me deep. For all her faults, Denise had never been cruel. Just scared. Scared of failing, of not being enough, of not being loved if she didn't succeed. I reached across the table and placed my hand over hers. "You could never disappoint me, baby. But you did hurt me." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I don't know how to make it right." "You don't," I said softly. "You just start again. And this time, you stay honest." The weeks that followed were fragile. Like glass mended with gold, our relationship glimmered, imperfect but strong. She started coming by on weekends, helping with the garden, cooking dinner. We didn't talk about the sale again. But the air between us carried unspoken apologies. One Sunday, as we sat under the oak tree, she asked, "Do you ever get lonely here, Mom?" I smiled faintly. "Lonely, sometimes, but not empty." "What's the difference?" she asked. "Loneliness is wanting someone. Emptiness is forgetting yourself." She nodded slowly. "I think I forgot myself for a while." I chuckled softly. "Then maybe it's time you remember who you are." One evening, Denise showed up unexpectedly with her 2 children. "Mom, can we stay a few days?" she asked. "Of course," I said, though I could see the worry in her eyes. Later that night, when the kids were asleep, she finally told me the truth. Her husband had left. Again. The debts she mentioned weren't just bills. He'd gambled away their savings, and the house she thought she'd sold mine for was gone too. I listened quietly as she cried. "I ruined everything," she whispered. "The house, my marriage, you." I shook my head. "No, baby. You didn't ruin me. You just reminded me how strong I am." She looked at me, eyes swollen. "How can you still be so kind to me after what I did?" "Because anger never built a home," I said. "But love can rebuild one from ashes." For the first time, she smiled, a real trembling smile. The next morning, I made pancakes for the children, just like I used to when Denise was little. Their laughter filled the kitchen, softening the ache that had lived there for months. Denise joined me by the sink, drying dishes. "Mom," she said quietly, "I'm going to get a new job, something steady. I'll pay back everything I owe you." I laughed gently. "You don't owe me money, baby. Just honesty, she nodded. That I can promise. A few days later, Mr. Carter dropped by with a stack of finalized papers confirming what I already knew. The house was officially safe, mine to keep. He handed them to me with a grin. You handled this better than most people I know, Clara, I smiled. Sometimes peace wins louder than noise, Mr. Carter. He chuckled. You should write a book. Maybe I already am, I said, glancing at my old journal resting on the table. That night, as the sky blushed into twilight, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea. Denise joined me quietly. I used to think you were fragile, she admitted. But you're the strongest woman I know, I chuckled softly. Strength doesn't always look loud, baby. Sometimes it just looks like showing up. Again and again. We sat together in silence as the cicadas sang their summer song. I thought about the past months. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the quiet rebuilding. Somehow, in losing trust, we had found honesty. The house around us glowed with warmth, the air thick with forgiveness. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was holding on to the past. I was simply living, steady, grateful, and whole. That night before bed, I wrote one last line in my journal. They can sell your house, but not your spirit. They can test your love, but not break it. And when the storm passes, the quiet woman still stands. I used to think healing came in loud ways. In apologies, in grand gestures, in someone finally saying, you were right. But I learned that real healing whispers. It arrives quietly, like sunlight through an old curtain, soft and patient. Months had passed since the day Denise came back into my life. The air in my home had changed, lighter somehow, though the walls still held the echoes of what we'd been through. Every morning I'd wake before dawn, brew my coffee, and sit by the window. The house creaked softly, not from age but from life. I found comfort in those small sounds. They reminded me that this house still belonged to me, and to the memories it carried. Denise had found a new job at the community library. She came by every few days after work, sometimes with the kids, sometimes alone. We were building something new. Not as mother and daughter trying to fix the past, but as two women learning to stand beside each other again. One evening she brought over a box. I found these in the attic of the rental, she said, placing it on the kitchen table. I opened it slowly. Inside were old family photos, yellowed letters, and a few drawings from when she was little. I held up a faded picture of us. She was maybe 7, smiling with missing teeth, holding a small potted plant. You remember this? I asked. Denise laughed softly. That was the first thing I ever grew. You said if I could keep that plant alive, I could keep anything alive. I smiled. You did. And you still can, she hesitated. You really think so, after everything I've done? I reached over and touched her cheek. Baby, forgiveness isn't something you earn. It's something you grow into. That night after she left, I sat alone on the porch and watched the stars bloom, one by one. For the first time in a long while, my heart didn't ache. It hummed, like a soft, steady song only I could hear. I remembered my late husband, Harold. The way he'd whistle while fixing the porch steps. The way his laughter filled every quiet moment. I whispered to the wind, "You'd be proud of her, Harold. You'd be proud of us." And maybe I imagined it, but the wind seemed to nod in agreement. The next morning I decided to do something I hadn't done in years. I walked to the back garden, the one I used to love but had stopped tending after Harold passed. The weeds were tall, the soil dry, but underneath all that neglect was still life waiting to be seen. I rolled up my sleeves, grabbed my gloves, and started working. Each pull of a weed felt like letting go of something. Anger, sadness, fear. By the time the sun reached its highest point, sweat trickled down my neck, and my heart felt lighter. I planted daisies first, Harold's favorite, then sunflowers for Denise, and lavender for peace. The scent carried on the breeze, gentle and forgiving. When Denise arrived later that evening, she gasped, "Mom, you did all this today?" I nodded. "Yes. Figured the ground's been waiting long enough to heal. Same as us." She smiled, tears glinting in her eyes. "It's beautiful." I handed her a small trowel. "Then help me keep it that way." We worked side by side as the sun dipped low, golden light spilling across the flowers. There was something sacred about it. Two women mending both soil and soul with quiet hands. As the weeks turned into months, the garden bloomed brighter than I could have imagined. Neighbors started stopping by, complimenting the colors, asking for cuttings. I'd smile and say, "Take what you need. Healing's meant to be shared." Denise began bringing her kids every weekend. They'd chase butterflies and help water the plants, their laughter weaving new life into the air. One afternoon, while we were having sweet tea on the porch, Denise said softly, "I think you're happier now than I've ever seen you." I nodded. "Because I stopped living for what I lost. I started living for what's still here." She looked thoughtful. "I wish I'd learned that sooner." I smiled. "You're learning it now. That's what matters." A few days later, I got a letter from the community center, inviting me to speak at their Women of Strength gathering. At first, I laughed. Me, giving a speech? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized I did have something to say. When the day came, I wore my soft lavender dress, the one Harold had always loved, and stood before a small crowd of women, young and old. I used to believe strength looked like never breaking. I began, my voice calm and steady, but I've learned that real strength is breaking, and still choosing to stand again. The room was silent, every eye on me. I lost my home once. Not the walls, but the sense of belonging. My own daughter betrayed me, and I thought I'd never trust again. But forgiveness, it's not weakness, it's freedom. When I finished, a few women stood and clapped softly. One came up to me afterward, tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. I needed to hear that. And in that moment, I understood something beautiful. My pain had become a bridge for someone else's healing. That evening, Denise hugged me tighter than ever before. "I heard your speech," she said. "You made me proud, Mom." I smiled. "You made me strong, baby. Both the good and the bad." We sat quietly as the garden glowed under the moonlight. Fireflies danced over the flowers, their light soft and fleeting. I thought about all the years I'd spent chasing peace, and realized it had been here all along, waiting for me to stop running. Sometimes, the healing ground isn't a place you find. It's the part of your soul that finally stops fighting and starts blooming again. Time has a way of softening even the sharpest memories. Months turned into a year, and life settled into a gentle rhythm again, one that didn't ache quite so much anymore. The garden outside had grown wild with beauty. The sunflowers stood tall, their golden heads turning toward the light each morning. The daisies danced with the breeze, and every time I looked at them, I saw pieces of my past blooming again, stronger, braver, softer. Denise and her children visited every weekend without fail. Laughter filled the house now. The same walls that had once heard silence now echoed with joy. And though there were still scars between us, they no longer hurt. They simply reminded us of what we'd survived. One morning, while sipping my tea on the porch, I found myself writing a letter. Not for anyone to read, but just for my own heart to rest. "Dear Harold, our daughter is learning. The house is alive again, with color, with laughter, with forgiveness. I thought betrayal had taken everything from me, but it only stripped away what wasn't true. What remains is real. What remains is love. I folded the letter and placed it in my old wooden box, the same one Denise used to call my heart chest. Inside it were all the pieces of my life. Harold's wedding ring, a faded photograph, a few birthday cards. And now, this letter, the final chapter of my heartbreak, turned healing. That afternoon, Denise arrived carrying a small wrapped gift. "Mom," she said shyly, "I got you something." I smiled. "What's this for?" "For everything," she said softly. "For forgiving me. For not giving up on me." I unwrapped the paper slowly. Inside was a silver key, resting on a ribbon. "It's the original key to this house," she said. "I found it in my things. I wanted you to have it back." I ran my fingers over the cool metal. It was heavy, familiar, grounding. "Thank you, baby," I whispered. "But you keep it. One day when I'm gone, this house will be yours again. Only this time, it'll be given with love, not taken." Tears welled in her eyes. "I don't deserve that." I shook my head gently. "We don't earn love, Denise. We honor it, and you're learning how to do that every day." Later that evening, as the sky turned orange and pink, we sat outside watching the children chase fireflies. Denise leaned against the railing and sighed. "You know, I used to think strength meant never needing anyone." I smiled. "That's what most people think. But real strength is knowing when to reach out a hand and when to let go." She nodded slowly. "You let me go once." "I did," I said softly. "And look how far you came back." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air was filled with the hum of cicadas and the soft rustle of the trees. "I'm proud of you," I whispered finally. "Not because you're perfect, but because you didn't stay broken." Denise turned to me, her eyes shining in the fading light. "You're my home, Mom. Not this house. You." Those words, they wrapped around me like a warm blanket. For all the hurt we had endured, for all the pain we had caused each other, love had found its way back, quiet, unshakable, whole. A few days later, I attended the local fair with my grandchildren. We walked through the garden stalls, the air thick with the smell of cinnamon and laughter. At one point, my youngest granddaughter tugged on my sleeve and handed me a tiny clay pot with a seedling inside. "This one's for you, Grandma," she said proudly. "It's gonna grow big, like your flowers." I smiled, kneeling to her level. "Thank you, sweetheart. I'll plant it right beside the others." As I watched her run off, carefree and full of life, something inside me settled. The story of my house wasn't about loss anymore. It was about growth. Every betrayal, every tear, every moment of silence had been a seed, but buried deep, waiting for light. And now, everything was in bloom. That night, after everyone had gone, home, I walked through the house, touching the walls, the pictures, the memories. I paused in the hallway where Harold's portrait hung. "I think we did good," I whispered to him. The light flickered softly. Like an answer, I smiled, then made my way to the porch. The same spot where I'd once cried over the papers that almost took my home away. Now, it was just peace. The air smelled of jasmine and forgiveness. I sat down, holding that silver key, the one Denise had given me, and closed my eyes. Sometimes, I murmured to myself, you don't fight to keep what's yours. You fight to remember who you are without it. Because the truth was simple. I wasn't the house or the garden or the mother who'd been betrayed. I was the woman who endured it all and still chose love. The moon rose high that night, silver and kind, lighting the porch where I sat. Somewhere inside I heard Denise's laughter echo through the phone as she called to say goodnight. The sound filled me with quiet pride, the kind that doesn't need words or recognition. As I looked up at the stars, I whispered one final thought into the night. She sold my house once, but she gave me something greater, the chance to rebuild both of us. And in that moment I understood what peace truly meant. Not forgetting the pain, but finally being grateful for what it taught me.